I sat in the familiar kitchen of the house where I grew up, the yellow light casting down on the long wooden table that had held so many childhood memories. Tonight, my parents called me back for dinner with my two younger brothers, saying there was something important to announce. The smell of roast meat and garlic bread filled the air, reminding me of family meals that once felt warm. But tonight, the atmosphere was heavy, unlike any other time. My father, Richard, glanced at my mother, Linda, then gave a slight nod. She clutched a napkin in her hand, her voice firm but forced into composure. "Claire, we want to speak clearly with you, so there will be no misunderstandings later." My chest tightened. I set my fork down, waiting to hear what was coming. My father cleared his throat, his eyes no longer carrying their usual warmth. "We have finalized our will, and we want you to hear it directly from us." I leaned forward slightly, my stomach in knots. Thomas and Daniel, both in their 30s, leaned back in their chairs, arms crossed, smirks tugging at their lips. "It's simple," my mother continued, her eyes fixed on me but her tone void of emotion. "This house, the beach condo, and every other asset will go to Thomas and Daniel. You will not receive any portion." Her words cut through me like a blade. I froze, my lips trembling. "Mom, Dad, you mean I get nothing?" Daniel let out a sharp laugh, his voice dripping with mockery. "That's right. You heard correctly. Everything belongs to us. You already have a stable job, a good income, you don't need anything more." I turned toward my father, hoping he would deny it or at least explain. But he only bowed his head, staring into his glass of water, refusing to meet my gaze. Pain welled up in my chest, mixing with a surge of anger. I bit down hard on my lip before speaking, my voice shaking yet icy. What have I done to deserve this? For years, I paid Mom's hospital bills, helped Dad cover the mortgage when work fell apart, and picked up the pieces every time Thomas and Daniel drowned in debt. I'm the one who kept this family afloat. And now I'm worth nothing? My mother sighed, her hand gripping the napkin tighter. Her reply carried both reproach and unease. "Claire, you always turn everything into a matter of money. You're independent, with a solid career. Your brothers aren't settled yet, they need more. We're doing this so they'll have opportunities." I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp yet hollow. "This isn't about fairness, it's about you spoiling them. I'm the eldest, I've carried this family countless times, and in return all I get is dismissal." Thomas tilted his head, his tone openly mocking. "You liked playing the hero, so don't complain now. No one forced you to help. Did you really think money could buy love?" Daniel chimed in, his eyes burning with ridicule. "Maybe you thought throwing cash around would make Mom and Dad love you more than us. Wake up." I turned back to my parents, waiting for them to scold my brothers, to stop the cruelty, but they stayed silent. And in that silence, I finally understood. To them, my only worth had ever been financial. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice into an unnervingly calm steadiness. "If that's your final decision, then I have one of my own." Thomas arched an eyebrow, sneering. "Oh? And what's that?" I pushed my chair back, the scrape echoing on the wooden floor, my heart pounding. I looked each of them squarely in the eyes. "From now on, don't expect me to carry anything for this family again." The room went dead silent. Only the faint smell of roast meat and garlic bread lingered, a scent once comforting, now hollow and meaningless. I walked to the door, slamming it shut behind me, leaving both my childhood and the hope of belonging behind. Out on the quiet suburban street, the cold air bit into my skin, but inside, I burned. Everything had changed forever, and I knew, in that moment, a chapter had closed, the chapter where I still believed I had a real family. I drove back to my apartment in the city, my hands still trembling with anger. Streetlights slid past the windows, casting shadows on my reflection in the rearview mirror, pale, rigid, and almost unrecognizable. All the way home, my mother's words cut into me like a knife. You already have a solid career, your brothers need it more. That sentence made me feel like all the years of sacrifice were nothing but a cruel joke. I collapsed onto the sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling. Memories rushed back, each one sharp and vivid like a slow-motion film. At 24, my father lost his job when the company went bankrupt. The suburban house mortgage still hung over us, and the bank sent constant warning letters. I, just a junior accountant with a modest salary, chose to strip away every personal need and pour my entire paycheck into covering my parents' debt. I remember the nights spent clutching stacks of bills, eyes burning, whispering to myself, just hold on, we won't lose the house. Then came the year my mother needed emergency surgery, $18,000. Insurance covered only a fraction. Who came up with the rest? I drained every cent I had saved for a car, then borrowed from coworkers to make sure she got treatment in time. I didn't regret it. I even felt proud to protect her. But now, looking back, my chest ached those dollars, that effort worthless in their eyes. Thomas, my second brother, switched majors 3 times, quitting each one. Every round of tuition, books, and dorm fees, I paid. I still remember late-night calls, him sobbing that he'd be kicked out if the bill wasn't paid. I'd run to the bank, wiring money so he'd have another chance. Yet today, he mocks me, saying I just liked playing the hero. Daniel wasn't any better. When he wanted a flashy car to show off online, I fronted half the cost. When he maxed out his credit cards and the bank chased him, I took out a short-term loan to save him from being blacklisted. And now, he jeers that I thought money could buy affection. I let out a bitter laugh in the darkness of my apartment. They had taken too much from me and given back only silence and contempt. I once believed sacrifice would earn love, that effort would bring fairness. Clearly, I was wrong. My phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice, urgent yet laced with reproach, came through. Claire, can't you stop being so sensitive? We only want to help your brothers. You're already secure they're not. I drew in a deep breath, choking back tears. Secure? Do you remember who covered the mortgage all those years? Who paid your hospital bills? Who kept Thomas in school? Who kept Daniel from bankruptcy? I gave up my youth, my chances, my small dreams just to hold this family together. And now, I get nothing but rejection. There was a pause, then a long sigh. Mom's tone hardened. You always see love in terms of money. The more you talk like this, the more selfish you sound. A dry laugh escaped me as I leaned back against the sofa. Selfish? If I were selfish, I'd have walked away years ago. I carried everything because I put this family first. But if you've already made your choice, then so have I. I won't keep doing this anymore. I hung up, my hand trembling but my heart unexpectedly lighter. For the first time in years, I had voiced the truth I had buried. I knew more calls would come from Dad, from Thomas, from Daniel, blame, ridicule, maybe even threats. But in that moment, it felt like I had stepped through a new door. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The recurring transfers glared back at me. $1,600 each month to my parents for the mortgage and bills, $800 to Thomas for tuition advances, $600 to Daniel for expenses. More than a third of my income, gone every month for years. My pulse raced as I scrolled. Each line felt like a chain tightening around me. My finger hovered over the cancel button. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then I pressed it. A notification popped up. Recurring payments successfully canceled. I shut my eyes and exhaled. The anger and bitterness still burned, but something new rose within me, a faint sense of release, as if a decade-long weight had finally slipped off my shoulders. My little apartment suddenly felt larger, quieter, and I realized this was my space, not the suburban house where every dinner had become a trap, binding me into the role of the family's payer. Outside the window, the city lights blazed, cars streaming along the boulevard. I sat still, my thoughts tangled but my resolve clear. From now on, I would no longer be anyone's walking wallet. I would live my own life, even if the road ahead bristled with storms. The next morning, as sunlight streamed into my apartment, I sat before my computer screen, staring at a bank statement that looked completely different. No more money flowing to my parents, no more support automatically sent to Thomas and Daniel. Everything I had tied myself to each month had vanished with just a few clicks. A strange, heavy feeling pressed into my chest, as if I had just unfastened the chains that bound me for over 10 years. My phone buzzed nonstop. First Mom's number, then Dad's, then Thomas and Daniel in turn. I let it ring, never answering. Instead, I poured a cup of coffee and sat quietly, watching the screen light up and fade again. The shrill rings, the flood of texts, made the small apartment feel under siege. I knew the script well pick up, and I'd hear the same reproaches, threats, or pleas. But this time, I was prepared for silence. Close to noon, I finally opened one text from Mom. Just a few words, yet crushing. Claire, you've just destroyed this family. If we can't pay the bills this month, we'll lose the house. I gripped my phone, inhaling deeply. That house, the same mortgage I had paid for dozens of cycles, was now being used to threaten me. I set the phone back on the table, determined not to answer. A while later, Dad called, his voice raspy as if he hadn't slept. Claire, I don't understand you anymore. After all these years of helping, why turn your back now? How do you think we'll survive if you stop? I closed my eyes, steadying my voice. Dad, I'm not turning my back. I'm just done carrying it all alone. I've helped more than enough, and all I get in return is dismissal. If you truly need support, why can't Thomas and Daniel step up too? He paused, then muttered bitterly, You really have changed. You're no longer the daughter who put family first. I clenched my teeth as he hung up. My heart ached, yet oddly, there was relief. By afternoon, Thomas sent a long message. Do you think this will get you anything? All you've proven is that you're selfish. Don't expect to be called our sister anymore. Right after, Daniel added, You'll regret this. Don't blame us when the whole family treats you like a stranger. My hands shook as I read, but I refused to reply. I knew any response would only give them fuel to keep pressing. Silence, for once, was my strongest weapon. That evening, I opened my laptop again, staring at the list of canceled transfers. Each deletion felt like slicing through an invisible cord that had wrapped me tight. $1,600 for my parents, $800 for Thomas, $600 for Daniel, all gone. Nearly $3,000 a month, money I had quietly bled out for more than a decade. I smiled faintly, a smile both bitter and freeing. When night fell, the apartment was so still I could hear my heartbeat. I brewed another cup of hot tea, sitting by the window, watching car lights flicker along the distant boulevard. In that silence, I finally felt it. I had stepped into another chapter of life. The old page, where I only gave and was never seen, had closed. Yet deep inside, I knew this decision would spark more fury than ever. I pictured evenings at the suburban house, my parents sitting with Thomas and Daniel, plotting how to force me back. They might show up at my door, or worse, smear my name. The thought made me shiver, but I whispered to myself, I chose this path. I have to see it through. That night, one last call came. Not Dad, not Mom, but Aunt Martha, my father's cousin, someone I rarely spoke with. Her voice was soft, worried. Claire, I heard you cut off all support. Your parents are furious, but I just want you to know, I understand why you did it. Don't let them make you feel guilty. Hearing her voice, my throat tightened. For the first time all day, I felt true empathy. I answered quietly, Thank you, Aunt. I just don't want to spend my whole life being taken advantage of anymore. After the call, I leaned against the wall, eyes blurring. The pain was still there, but within it, a seed of freedom began to sprout. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay listening to the rhythm of my own breath, and for the first time in years, I realized this silence, though terrifying, was the sign of a new beginning. A beginning where I, Claire, would finally learn to live for myself. A week after I stopped all financial support, a text from my mother came through, curt and cold, 7 p.m. Saturday, come home. The whole family needs to talk. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. I knew this wasn't going to be a talk. It would be a confrontation. Saturday arrived, and I drove back to my parents' suburban house. The familiar road, once filled with childhood memories, now only left a lump in my throat. Lights glowed inside, shadows flickered behind the curtains. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked in, forcing my gaze to stay steady. The living room was thick with tension. My father, Richard, stood by the fireplace, hands clasped, his eyes heavy. My mother sat in the armchair, eyes swollen as if she had been crying. Thomas and Daniel were already there, arms crossed, their stares sharp, ready to attack at any moment. I had barely sat down when my mother spoke, her voice trembling but pressing hard. Claire, you're pushing this family into ruin. We can't even cover the utilities. If you keep being stubborn, I'll break down. I kept my composure, replying slowly. Mom, for 10 years I've paid most of those bills. If you're overwhelmed now, then Dad and my brothers need to share the responsibility. It can't all fall on me. My father stepped forward, his tone low and heavy. Easy for you to say. But Thomas and Daniel don't have stable careers. You're the only one with a steady job. It's natural the family depends on you. Thomas scoffed, tilting his head at me. You act like you're the victim. Nobody forced you to send money, you just liked showing off. Now you stop and blame everyone else. Daniel cut in, sarcasm dripping from his voice. You've got a job, a big paycheck, and a nice apartment in the city. What about us? We're the ones who really need help. If you truly loved this family, you wouldn't be so selfish. I drew a long breath, my heart pounding, but my tone stayed calm. Have you ever thought about what I've sacrificed? The vacations I gave up, the promotions I turned down so I could work overtime, all just to keep this family afloat. I never asked for gratitude. But if, even now, my worth to you is just as a wallet, then I have no reason to keep doing this. My mother clenched her napkin, tears glistening, but her words were sharp. You're tearing this family apart. Don't forget who raised you all these years. You have your career today because of the foundation we gave you. A bitter laugh escaped me, my eyes stinging but my voice firm. You raised me only to treat me as an endless money machine? If you think parenting was just an investment for lifelong payouts, then I'm sorry I can't do this anymore. The room fell silent except for the ticking clock. My father's gaze bore into me, torn between fury and helplessness. At last, he spoke coldly. If you truly walk away, then don't ever call this house your home again. I rose, gripping my bag tightly, my chest burning but my steps steady. I've known for a long time this hasn't been my home. I was just the one paying your debts all these years, nothing more. I turned and walked out, leaving behind my mother's frozen face and the hatred in Thomas and Daniel's eyes. The door shut with a final thud, echoing like a declaration. I had severed the last tie binding me to that house. Driving back to the city, the night wind rushed through the car windows. My hands gripped the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. The battle may have branded me a traitor in their eyes, but to me it was the first step toward reclaiming my freedom. I thought after that tense family meeting they would stop trying to force me, but only a few days later, things escalated beyond what I ever imagined. That Wednesday night, coming home from a late shift, I immediately sensed something wrong. My apartment door was sealed shut with a thick layer of gray industrial foam, hardened like cement, filling every crack from the lock to the frame. I touched it, the foam was rock solid. There was no way I could open the door. My heart pounded, my hands shook. This wasn't a prank. Someone had deliberately locked me out of my own home. I pulled out my phone and called the building manager. He arrived with a maintenance worker, but after inspecting, he shook his head. This will need a special service crew. Someone clearly brought tools and did this on purpose. While waiting, I opened the hallway security camera feed. Fast forwarding through the footage, my blood ran cold. There he was, Daniel, wearing a dark hoodie and baseball cap, holding a can of industrial foam, carefully spraying every corner of my door. His face was partially covered, but his gait, his gestures, even the way he adjusted his cap, I knew instantly. It was Daniel, my own brother. Gripping my phone, fury and heartbreak tore through me. They were willing to vandalize my property to intimidate me, all because I refused to keep carrying them. I had no choice. I called the police. 30 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. I explained everything, showing them the video. One nodded after watching. "We'll file a report. This is property damage, and the footage is clear. Do you want to press charges or request compensation?" I drew a deep breath, staring at my sealed door, my resolve solidifying. Yes. I want him held accountable. The next morning, Dad called repeatedly. When I finally answered, his voice was harsh, laced with anger. "Claire, how could you call the police on your brother?" "Daniel just lost his temper. Families fight. That's normal." I kept my tone calm. "Dad, this isn't a fight anymore. He destroyed my property. If I don't act, next time could be worse." Dad tried to soften his voice, but the pressure was obvious. "So what do you want?" "Money for the repairs?" I answered without hesitation. $3,000. That's the cost to fix and replace everything. If Daniel doesn't pay, I'll let the police handle it." There was a pause, then Dad snapped, voice thick with rage. "You're extorting your own brother. Do you even see us as family anymore?" A bitter laugh slipped out. "No, Dad. This isn't extortion. It's consequences. Real family doesn't harm each other like this." That afternoon, my bank account showed a transfer of $3,000, accompanied by a short message from Daniel. "I don't ever want to see you again." I set my phone down, my chest heavy and cold. The money didn't feel like a victory. It only confirmed the truth. The fracture between me and my family was beyond repair. But the storm wasn't over. That very evening, scrolling through social media, I saw a long post from Mom. She claimed I had turned my back on the family, cut off support, and even ruined my brother's future by calling the police. The post quickly drew dozens of comments from relatives and my parents' friends, most condemning me as ungrateful, selfish, obsessed with money. I sat frozen, hands trembling as I read each line. None of them knew the bills I had paid, the tuition I had covered, the debts I had erased. They only saw the distorted version of the story Mom had spun. I realized if I stayed silent, this one-sided narrative would spread and I'd forever be the villain. Anger surged, but alongside it, a sharp determination. If they wanted to brand me the enemy, it was time to bring the truth into the light. I opened my laptop and began typing my response. In it, I listed every dollar I had sent over the past decade, every sacrifice I made for Thomas, for Daniel, for my parents. I attached the video of Daniel vandalizing my door. I wasn't going to suffer quietly anymore. The screen glowed, my fingers flying across the keys, my heart pounding. I knew once I hit post, everything would change. My family would explode with rage. Relatives would be shaken. But this was my only chance to reclaim my voice. I straightened in my chair, moved the cursor to post, and took a deep breath. I clicked. The screen flashed, and in that moment, I understood. The battle between me and my family had entered an entirely new phase. My post went live on social media, and within hours it exploded in controversy. I laid everything out with exact numbers. $1,600 each month to my parents to Keep the suburban house, 800 to Thomas through his 3 failed years in school, 600 to Daniel for his credit card debts and that shiny new car he flaunted everywhere. I attached my bank statements along with the video of Daniel sealing my apartment door, proof no one could dismiss as made up. The first comments rolled in, and many relatives were stunned. Aunt Margaret wrote, "I never knew Claire had paid this much. Why didn't Linda ever say so?" A cousin added, "If that's true, it's clearly unfair." But others still defended my parents, repeating the same tired line: "Successful children are supposed to support their families." I read them all, my hand tightening around my phone. Mom didn't stay quiet for long. Just a few hours later, she replied directly under my post, "Claire is twisting the truth. Money cannot replace family. She only wants to humiliate us." The words stabbed at me, but I didn't delete or respond. I let everyone judge for themselves. That night, I received a private message from Aunt Martha, the only one who had reached out to comfort me the week before. She wrote, "You did the right thing. Let the truth speak. Don't be afraid." I read it over and over, then allowed myself a small smile. In the storm, at least one person stood by me. The next day, the story spread into my parents' old circle of friends and neighbors. One neighbor commented, "I personally saw Claire rushing to the bank to send money for her parents. No one has the right to call her ungrateful." Those voices started to outweigh the criticism. I could feel the balance shifting. Late that evening, Dad called. His voice was hoarse, thick with fury. "Claire, you've humiliated this family. Everyone's talking. Do you even consider yourself our daughter anymore?" I answered coldly, "I've only spoken the truth. If you feel ashamed, maybe you should ask yourselves why." He snapped, "You're destroying this. Family's honor." I cut in. "No, you destroyed it when you turned me into a walking wallet. I'm just refusing to hide it anymore." I hung up. His words echoed in my head, but this time they didn't trigger guilt. Instead, I felt lighter, as though I had shed the mask I had worn for years. The next morning at the office, a coworker leaned over and whispered, "Claire, we read your post. You're brave. Not everyone could stand up like that." I gave a faint smile, grateful but anxious. My private life was no longer private, but at least I wasn't suffering alone anymore. By the weekend, I received a message from a distant cousin. "Claire, the whole family is talking. People are starting to question Richard and Linda. They can't explain why you carried everything yet were cut out of the will." My chest tightened, torn between pain and grim satisfaction. At last, my parents were being forced into the light, but the price of truth was finality. That night, Mom called. Her tone was no longer angry, just icy. "If you keep exposing private matters, then don't call us family anymore." I paused, then answered firmly, "I lost my family the day you turned me into a credit card. I have nothing left to lose." I ended the call before she could reply. My heart ached, yet at the same time a surge of strength rose inside me. I had gone too far to turn back, and I no longer wanted their approval. In the days that followed, no more calls, no more texts from my parents or brothers, only silence. Strangely, the silence didn't frighten me. It felt like the first real space in my life where I was free. I was no longer Claire who sends money every month. I was simply me, a 32-year-old woman, finally living for herself. I stood by my apartment window, watching the city glowing under the night sky. A cold breeze slipped in, lifting strands of my hair. After weeks of silence, I slowly learned how to focus on myself. My job at the finance firm downtown became my strongest anchor. No longer did I calculate how much to send home each month. No longer did I grit my teeth and turn down opportunities out of fear of falling short on family payments. All my energy poured into a high-stakes project, restructuring the investment portfolio of a major real estate group. I worked tirelessly, but unlike before, This time, the long hours brought joy and freedom. I wasn't working overtime to ship off money. I was doing it to prove my skill. 3 months later, the project exceeded expectations, saving the client millions of dollars. At the final meeting, the CEO stood and declared, "Claire, your dedication and decisiveness made this possible. We're officially promoting you to head of investment analysis." Applause filled the room as I rose to accept, eyes burning with tears. To be recognized for my ability, not for the money I sacrificed, was like stepping into a new life. In the days that followed, I allowed myself to enjoy the reward. I stopped at a travel agency's glass display of discounted tickets and thought, why have I never traveled, always chained by others' needs? That same day, I booked a trip to Italy, the country I had dreamed of since college. When the plane landed in Florence on a sunny afternoon, the air was rich with the scent of roasted coffee, fresh bread, and lavender drifting from small corner cafes. I strolled cobblestone streets, gazed up at the red dome of Santa Maria del Fiore, and felt something I had never felt before. I was living for me. On the second day, I sat at a café in Piazza della Signoria, sipping cappuccino. As I set down my cup, a warm male voice spoke. "You seem to really enjoy this place." I looked up to see a man in his mid-30s, light brown hair, a gentle smile. He introduced himself as Alex, an interior architect from New York, in Italy to study European design. I was cautious at first, but his sincerity disarmed me. I smiled back. Our conversation began with architecture and Italian coffee, then drifted deeper. Alex never pried into family, never pressed for details, he just listened, as if my words mattered. Before leaving, he said, "If you'd like company exploring Florence, I'd be glad to join." I hesitated only a second, then nodded. Over the next days, we walked along the Arno River, stood on Ponte Vecchio watching the city bathed in golden sunset. I laughed more than I had in years, relieved not to carry the burdened role of eldest child. With Alex, I was simply Claire, a woman savoring her own life. One evening on a rooftop terrace, city lights glowing around us, Alex said softly, "You know, Claire, sometimes happiness comes only when we let go of what's been holding us back." His words sank deep. I realized I had been chained by false duty. Now, for the first time, I felt true freedom. When the trip ended, I left Florence with a light heart. I didn't know where things with Alex would lead, but what mattered was that I had found myself again. Back in the US, I returned to work with renewed energy. My apartment no longer felt like a pit stop between transfers, but a true home. I decorated the living room with paintings from Italy, placed a lavender pot by the window, so every morning I'd remember, I deserve a life of my own. Friends noticed the change. They said I looked brighter, more decisive, and I knew though the past had scars, I had started a new chapter. One autumn evening, standing on my balcony, the breeze brushing past, I whispered to myself, "From now on, Claire lives for Claire." No longer the shadow in my family, no longer the endless source of money. Just a free woman, determined to claim her own happiness. And I believed it was only the beginning of a journey I should have taken long ago. That winter, as the city lay under blankets of snow, I sat in my apartment, the warm yellow light reflecting off the paintings I had brought back from Florence. No more calls, no more relentless texts from my parents or brothers. At first, the silence stung, but gradually I realized it was freedom. One evening, Aunt Martha visited, carrying a box of warm apple pie. She sat on my sofa, took my hands, her eyes filled with compassion. "Claire, I'm sorry your parents will never understand how much you've sacrificed, but remember, you are not alone. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who truly love you." Her words pierced deep, and for the first time in years, someone in the family recognized me not for the money I gave, but for who I was. At the end of the year, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment, inviting close friends and a few trusted coworkers. They brought wine, desserts, and laughter. As we raised our glasses, I felt warmer than I had at any dinner in that suburban house. No blame, no scorn, only genuine connection. While everyone chatted, I stood by the window, gazing at the Christmas lights glowing outside. I realized happiness wasn't clinging to a family that never valued me. Happiness was letting go, making room for relationships that truly mattered. One day, I heard from an acquaintance. Dad was working night shifts at a warehouse. Mom had taken hourly cleaning jobs. Thomas lost his job for failing to perform, while Daniel still chased the empty dream of online fame. I felt neither triumph nor sorrow. These were the consequences of their own choices. They once had me as a lifeline, but they had cut me loose. Now they had to learn to swim. I began attending a Sunday morning yoga class, meeting new friends who shared passions for health, books, and travel, things I had once ignored while drowning in family debts. I even volunteered at a women's independence center, teaching financial skills. Each time I saw someone regain confidence and break free from dependence, I saw a reflection of myself. One evening, while tidying my desk, I found an old family photo. I stared for a long while, then slipped it into a drawer. I didn't rip it up, didn't throw it away. The past was still part of me, but it no longer defined my future. Alex and I kept in touch after Florence. We didn't rush to label what we had, but every conversation brought me peace. He didn't see me as a duty, nor did he demand I prove my worth. With him, I could simply be Claire, something I had never truly been allowed before. On a late December night, I wrote in my journal, "Family isn't measured only by blood. True family is built on love, respect, and gratitude. From now on, I'll create my own family with people who cherish me, and through my own choices." Closing the notebook, I knew I had reached the end of one painful journey, ready to begin another. I was no longer the Claire who silently wired money, hoping it would buy a scrap of love. I was Claire, free, strong, and walking my own path. Looking back, I saw clearly, sometimes losing a family isn't tragedy at all. Sometimes it's the chance to finally find the real one, the people who stay, not for benefit, but for love. That's true. Claire's story reflects a truth that still exists in real life. Blood ties don't always mean unconditional love. She spent years carrying the family's financial weight, sacrificing herself only to be met with dismissal and ingratitude. By daring to cut ties, face retaliation, and endure public judgment, she discovered the true value of freedom and the right to live for herself. This is a reminder for today. Real happiness comes from letting go of toxic bonds and embracing relationships built on sincerity. What do you think about Claire's choice, bravely leaving the burden behind to reclaim her freedom and happiness? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories.